Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly Q&A. Ask your favorite RCDD. Chuck Bowser. Glad to be here with you guys tonight. You may have noticed an absence. I had to go to the hospital, have a kidney stone removed, so I'm just now getting caught back up with work, and now I'm caught back up with work. I'm starting to do my other stuff, my side gig stuff. So starting to do more, get back to the Q&A and also the podcast. The podcast will actually be released tomorrow, and then another one again on Monday. So getting caught up. So again, we always start off our sessions with, what are you drinking? And tonight it's going to be something different. Can you guess what I'm drinking tonight? It is, you probably think, well, Chuck, that looks like milk. It kind of is milk, but it's goat milk. Goat milk. We have a farm, or a homestead, 3-acre homestead. We have goats, and we do goat milk, and I'm having a little bit of goat milk tonight. If you're into homesteading, gardening, animals, all that fun stuff, hugelkultur, food preservation, check out the Bowser Journal. That's actually a bigger channel than my Let's Talk Cable one, where my wife and I do all kinds of cool, fun stuff, growing gardens and stuff like that. So what are you guys drinking tonight? Put it in the chat box. Let us know what it is that you're drinking. Otherwise, how are we going to have some fun tonight? Remember, it is after hours, so you can drink whatever you want. I love goat milk. The funny thing is, the first time you have something other than what you normally drink, because I used to drink cow milk all the time. And the reason we don't drink cow milk is because we don't have a cow on the property. We have a steer on the property, but we don't have a cow. The first time you eat something that you're not normally used to, i.e. duck eggs for us, a goose egg for us, yes, you can eat those. Or goat milk, you're kind of like, the first time you drink it, because you used to drink cow milk, you're like, I prefer goat milk, excuse me, over cow milk now. But because I'm keto, I don't drink a whole lot of milk anyway. So every once in a blue moon, I kind of treat myself. So let's get on with the show. So again, in the chat box, tell us what it is that you are, what are you drinking? What are you drinking? And I'm watching the chat box here. We ran a little bit late tonight, so maybe some people and because I was off last week, maybe people don't realize that I didn't advertise this one either. I was got behind the ball, and I totally forgot I was doing a whole bunch of stuff for work that takes priority over this, unfortunately. And I had to get that stuff done. So we did make sure. So make sure that you introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know who you are, where you're from, so we can all kind of get to know each other. I see a couple study group members joining in. Thank you for being here. Our study group, yes. So I have a study group that I'm going through with a set of people. I think it's 21 people, 22 people, something like that. And we meet every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. And we have a predetermined section that we read out of the TDMM, and we're working our way through. And in 6 months, everybody will be done. And I'm going through the TDMM, not because I studied from RCDD test, but because I haven't read the TDMM in a while. And the 14th edition came out last year, and I need to be current. That's why I'm reading through it. But everybody else in it who's reading that section is planning to take their RCDD exam. There are 2 people already, 2 people who have from our study group who has already passed the RCDD exam. Atif and Sanji, I think the other one was. So congratulations to you two. Welcome. I will teach you the super secret handshake next time I meet you guys face to face. I can't do it online because it's super secret. Can't be telling people about that super secret handshake, right? So I was off for a while. So I did capture a lot of questions. So I don't know if I'll get to any live questions tonight. Maybe not. We'll kind of see. Just really all depends, right? But just in case, make sure that you go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. If I don't get to it tonight, I will definitely answer it during the next after hours, which I will post that. I will schedule that one probably Friday or maybe even Saturday. So that way it'll be sitting out there for a week. Oh, I forgot to put my phone on silent. I apologize for that. There we go. It is on silent, so that should no longer be an issue. Rule number 1 when you're creating videos and podcasts, silence your phone. Yeah, Yeah, okay. I'm not perfect, okay? Don't beat me up over this. Make sure that if you haven't already, make sure that you check out the Let's Talk Cabling podcast. Make sure that you check out the YouTube channel. Everything's recorded and put on there. It's kind of funny. I always keep an eye on. By the way, I'm on LinkedIn. Send me a friend request on LinkedIn, and then you'll be notified when the newest stuff comes out. Or you can join our email list. Go to letstalkcabling.com and join the email list there, and you'll be notified when new content is published out, and that way you won't miss anything. And there's been a lot of issues lately with YouTube and demonetizing and taking down videos of people, stuff like that. But this is never going to be a controversial channel. We're talking about cabling. We're not talking politics or anything like that. So, but I'm a firm believer in 2 is 1, 1 is none, meaning you have to have a backup. And I don't want to have sole rely on just YouTube, because what happens if YouTube goes back, or what happens if Google decides tomorrow we don't want to do that video platform thing anymore? They probably won't, but what happens if they do? I don't have a backup. So, join the email list, and then that way you can keep informed if anything like that ever does indeed happen. But again, make sure that you put your questions in the chat box. So the first question came to me via LinkedIn, and it's John. And John says, we are installing some copper grounding conductor cabling, and my boss keeps referring to it as 4-aught, but it's 4/0. Why they call it aught? Good question. Aught is an old colloquial term for a mathematical symbol of 0. You'll see it a lot, sometimes in movies. So, for example, like a movies that's like a historical kind of a movie, and it's taking place in like 1905 or 1906. They'll say sometimes they'll say 1906, 1907, or something like that. It's just a colloquial term that's been around for quite a while, but generally it's in the bonding conductor, like you just mentioned, and it's only going to be used for conductors generally larger than 1-aught. So it'll be 1/0, it'll be 1-aught, 2/0, it'll be 2-aught, and you get the idea, right? It does not necessarily apply to circular mill. So sometimes you might hear a conductor referred to as KC mill or MCM. That's just talking about the size of the conductor. So a 4-aught is roughly about just shy of 3/4 of an inch. It's 0.72 inches. So it's a pretty big conductor. So kudos for you guys for putting that in. And by the way, it's not a grounding conductor unless you are attaching it to a ground. Otherwise, it's a bonding conductor, because in the communications industry, we bond things to a ground. We don't ground them generally. You're not grounding something unless you're driving an electrode into the earth. Okay. Big distinction there. So the next question came to me via an email, and it says, Chuck, I just sat in the class, and they said that backbone cables may be bridge tapped in existing cabling. What is bridge tapped? Okay, bridge tapping, you'll see that a lot in the old telephony cable plant, the outside plant cable plant. So what basically means is, and you'll only see it used for analog voice. It doesn't work really well with digital signals, but for analog signals, it works just fine. So basically what it does is it allows one cable to service multiple users. For example, you might see like a 100 pair cable. Next time you're driving down the road, you might see a 100 pair cable on that aerial outside plant cable, and it'll go into a splice case. And then coming out of that splice case, you'll see 2 or 3 or 4 cables coming out of it, right? And it might be 25 pairs, 50 pairs, 100 pairs, whatever. That is a bridge tap. Again, it doesn't really like to have digital signals on it, so that's why it tells us in the TDMM that pretty much you want to stay away from that. So, I start on question number 4. Whoops, I skipped questions 1 through 3. We'll get back to those in a second. And then the next question I got is actually came to me again, another one through LinkedIn, through direct message. And I didn't document the person who this actually came from. So this one it says, Chuck, what is the difference between a hot melt and a 2-part epoxy fiber optic connector? They're similar, but they're different. Okay. Now a hot melt, it's the manufacturer for hot melt is usually going to be 3M or Corning or something like that. There might be other ones out there as well. I'm really familiar with the 3M one, although I've never had a chance to do any of the others. So what they do is when you get a connector, that connector is already filled with an epoxy, and you have to put it into an oven, and you have to heat it up so that when you strip your fiber, you can stick it through that epoxy, and then when you take it out of the oven, the epoxy cools and it cures it inside of that. Generally, it's got to sit in that oven for 75 seconds for up to 5 minutes. And be prepared, because you will burn yourself doing hot melt connectors. Okay, it's just gonna happen. It's just one of those things. And then some of the older hot melt connectors, you actually had to scrub and polish them and stuff too. I got to imagine they have some mechanical hot melts now. I just don't know off the top of my head. I have to actually go research that for you. The two-part epoxy connectors, it's a connector, and then you put the epoxy into the connector. Now that epoxy would take literally a long time for it to cure. So that second part that's why it's called two-part epoxy, is an activator. So what happens is the activator causes the epoxy to cure within a minute or two, depending on which manufacturer you're using. So what you'll do is you'll take a syringe or syringe tip, you'll squirt the epoxy into the connector until you see a little tiny dot on that end face. And then once you see that little remember, the smaller the dot, the less polishing you got. So you see the dot, and then you'll go ahead and take your fiber, you'll strip it and you cleave it per the manufacturer's instructions, because everybody's got different measurements and stuff like that. Then when you put the activator on, this is where you really want to be careful. Let's say, for example, let's say this pen is your fiber strand, right? And let's say that this dark area of the pen is where the acrylic coating is. This is the part that we just stripped off. Okay. So when you apply the activator, you want to start back on the acrylic coating, and then you want to come up the fiber, but you only want to come up about halfway. You don't want to go all the way. What that's going to do for you is when you go to stick that fiber into that connector, if you take the activator up all the way, as soon as this ends hits that hot melt, the epoxy, it's going to try to lock it up immediately, which will make it kind of hard to get the fiber all the way through. If you only come up halfway, then the fiber is already coming out the other side before the activator hits the epoxy. It makes it a little bit easier, right? So we keep that in mind. That's a good tip. There's pro tip number 1 for you tonight. So why would someone choose a two-part epoxy or a hot melt over like a mechanical connector? There's lots of criteria. I guess the biggest one, if it's not a customer-driven requirement, I apologize if you can hear my dog walking through here. He's probably going to come back and get on the couch if I know my bubby. Maybe I should make him the new mascot for this show. Yeah, the Nico show. Yeah. Anyways, getting back. If the customer's not putting out a requirement for a specific type of connector, then you as a company or as a installer, you're going to default to what you work with the most, what you're most comfortable with. Some people are more comfortable with mechanic connectors. Some are more comfortable with fusion splicing. Some are more comfortable with. When it comes to customers, customers kind of sometimes will say, well, we want some kind of epoxy or a hot melt connector. Don't like those mechanical connectors. And the reason for that is many, many years ago when the mechanical connectors first came out, there were some problems with them, consistency problems. They were having problems with them, especially if they're in an environment where they would get cycling of hot and cold air. They would have some issues with them and stuff. And customers got stung by that once, twice, 3 times, and they decided from that point on, no more mechanical connectors, only going to do hot melt or something like that, some kind of a permanent. So that you might have a customer that might require that. Performance-wise, it's a tad bit better because there's splice inside the connector, but mechanical connectors today are absolutely resilient, absolutely top-notch performing, and it's not going to be an issue. You're going to find that a mechanical connector is going to cost a little bit more money than a two-part epoxy type connector, but the time is going to be less. For the two-part epoxy connector, the connector is usually going to cost a little bit more. I'm sorry, a little bit less. But then let me back up. I got that wrong. So a two-part epoxy connector is going to be cheaper, but it's going to take more time. The mechanical connector is going to be more expensive connector, but it's going to take less time. Interesting enough, when many, many years ago, when I used to be an estimator, my boss asked me to do a time analysis because he wanted to figure out which one was going to be better. Because one of those, you need a a pretty expensive, cleave tool, and the other one you need to go through a whole bunch of consumables. So they wanted to figure out which was going to be the best to standardize on. So I built up a spreadsheet of terminating 1,000 mechanical connectors, 1,000 two-part epoxy connectors, and account for everything. You accounted the consumables and all that stuff. And I found that even though they had different labor rates, but when you factor everything else, the costs were pretty close together. They weren't that far apart. I mean, they were negligible, not enough to really say, wow, that's a huge difference. Let's use those kinds of connectors moving forward. So at that point, you just really got to go with what are you comfortable with, or what are your technicians comfortable with. All right, that's going to help a lot. Okay, another question. This one came in via email, and this one says, Chuck, I'm looking to purchase some more tools with my stimulus check. That's a good investment right there. Should I get an office locator kit or a tone generator kit? Can you get both? That'd be my recommendation. If you have enough to get both, get both. If not, I would start off with a tone generator set. That's actually going to be a little bit less than the office locator kit, and you can do the same things with an office locator kit, just not as fast or as efficient we can with an office locator kit. For those who are listening who don't know what a tone generator set is or an office locator kit is, a tone generator is two pieces equipment. One's actually a little square box. It's called a toner. It's got an on-off switch, and it usually has two wires coming out with alligator clips and sometimes a little RJ11. And you can put that on a cable or plug it into a jack, and you can turn on the toner, and it puts a tone on the cable. And then the other piece of that is the inductive amplifier. Some people call them wands. It's got a button on. You push the button, there's a little speaker, and when you put that into a bundle of cables, you'll hear the toner. And then when it gets really loud, you found the cable. You can also, people don't know this, you can also use a tone generator for continuity. You can actually flip the switch the other way, and you can test for continuity on that pair that you're working with. An office locator kit is going to be a little more expensive. It's a kit that looks like a tester, and then they give you plugs. Depending on which kit you get, depends on how many plugs you get. Sometimes it's 6, 12, 10. I've seen a whole bunch of them. But if you buy one with 10, right, what you can do is you get these 10 little modular plugs. You can take those 10 plugs and you can plug them into the jacks out on the floor, and they got numbers on them. And then when you plug the main tester piece into the patch panel, it'll say, oh, this is number 1, because it's going to pick up the number off that modular plug that you put into the thing. And so that way it allows you to tone faster, quicker. But it's going to be a little bit more money. I haven't priced one in a while, but I remember the last time I looked at them, they were a little bit more expensive than a tone generator was, right? So let me go ahead and go back here. And again, if make sure you put your question in the chat box. If I have time, I will answer your questions earlier today. So going back to question number 1, since I skipped over that. See, I told you Chuck is old school. Chuck is old school. He's old and old school. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So this one came to me via actually a phone call. A phone call came to me. This is actually a question from an old person, a person that I used to work with. And he asked me not to say his name because he's got lots of experience, and he thinks he should know this. And, hey, make sure you listen to my podcast coming out tomorrow or on Friday or Saturday, coming out Saturday. I'm going to explain about how even the most experienced people can be wrong. So his question was, we're putting in some conduit between 2 telecom rooms, and we have to use a pull box. Can we use the box to change the directions of the conduit run? The answer to that is no, you can't. The conduit has to come in and go out opposite to each other. You never use a pull box as a turn. You can have it before turn, you can have it after turn, but you don't want to do the pull box to be a turn by itself. So if it comes in this side of the pull box, it should go out that side of the pull box, right? You don't want to come in this side and then go out that side, right? You don't want to do that turn inside of it. It's got to go straight through. And that got me to thinking, because we had a really good conversation. And so I told him, well, number 1, make sure you leave a pull string. That's one of my big pet peeves, right? Leave a pull string in the conduit. You'd be surprised how many people forget to do that. And make sure you leave a good pull string too, like a 200-pound pulling tension pull string, right? Because, you make sure that that you can indeed pull new cables through in that as well. The pull box also has to be rated for the area that it's installed. So make sure you understand if that area, that ceiling, is plenum or riser rated, or if it's a general environment. That's going to tell you what kind of a pull box that you can actually put inside of that ceiling. And another one that a lot of people don't realize is you have to have a pull box that, this is not a code thing. This is more of a high performance data cabling thing. There should be a pull box placed every 100 feet. Every 100 feet. So if you have a conduit run that goes 295 feet, because that's the maximum length we can have a horizontal cable, you need to have at least 2 pull boxes, one at 100 feet, one at 200 feet, and the third one is just shy of needing to be placed. Now you can put in a third one. You can always exceed it, but at least every 100 feet. What that does is it helps keep gives you additional pulling stations, so that way you don't pull on the cables hard, less chance of you damaging the cable. If you pull too hard on on 4-pair cabling, you're going to change twist rates. You're going to stretch the copper. All that affects the performance. And your number one duty as a cable installer while you're installing cable is to keep that cable from getting crushed, kinked, torn, damaged, cut, burnt, because the more pristine that cable is, the better it's going to perform. And if you got a run that's 295 feet or 90 meters for I'm getting a lot of people connecting with me from Saudi Arabia and Egypt. So I think that's just so cool. Getting to meet people from around. My boss actually spent a few years over there. So I just find it really interesting. So yeah, make sure that you do that as well. Okay. And then let me see. What was that last question? Oh, one more thing about pull boxes. This is another pet peeve of mine. Make sure that you place it in an area that's accessible. Okay. It's nothing's more, especially you get in a ceiling like in a hospital or something, and those ceilings are already going to be congested. But if you put the pull box, then somebody puts some conduit runs underneath it, and you can't open the pull box, or it's really difficult to open a pull box, or to get into the pull box to pull your cable through, it's a nightmare. It's really a nightmare. So make sure that you leave them accessible. The next question, this one came to me via email. It says, Chuck, why does my Cat 5e patch cord seem to be slightly larger than my same gauge Cat 5e UTP cable? You're pretty observant. A lot of people don't catch that. Now, there's many reasons why one cable might be thicker than the other, even though they're both the same gauge and the same category rating of cable. There's a lot of things that affect the thickness, affect the outside diameter of a cable. First off is the cable jacket, right? Is it polyethylene? Is it PVC? Whatever. Those can be different. The amount of twist per inch and anything inside the cable. So, for example, some of your high performance data cables might have monofiller tubes or crossweb separators and stuff like that, which increases the outside diameter. That can always happen. But if everything else is all equal, I mean, if they're both using the exact same dielectric on the conductors, the same twist rates, the same jacket, a lot of people don't realize that stranded cable is always going to be a little bit larger than solid conductor cabling, because the cross-sectional space of stranded conductor cabling, right? You got a bunch of, for those who may not understand the difference between solid conductor cabling and stranded conductor cabling. Generally, stranded conductor cabling is used for patch cords because it's flexible and allows you to route through desks and stuff like that. But they also have more attenuation. That's why we don't use stranded cables for long runs. For the horizontal cables, because the attenuation is more. If you take a patch cord and you cut it in half, an old patch cord, one that's bad that you're not using anymore, cut it in half, strip off the dielectric off one of the conductors, and you're going to find not one copper conductor, but many copper conductors. It's stranded. And when you look in it as on a microscope, you'll notice that there's space in between each one of those strands. So to get to that same gauge size, it's going to be a little bit bigger. That's why it's always that big. Now, a solid conductor cable, for example, your 4-pair cable, UTP cable that you're pulling from your horizontal cross connect inside your tele patch panel or the 110 block, whatever it is that you're using as your horizontal cross connect. When you strip the dielectric off one of those conductors, you're going to find one solid conductor. That's the difference between solid conductor and strand conductor cabling. Okay. And then the next question I got came to me via email, and it says, Chuck, we have an RFP asking for a copy of our safety plan as part of our bid. We don't have one. Help. Okay. Hopefully you learned your lesson, because you should have a good safety plan in writing and already in place and operational. So use this as a lesson learned, create one, and then use it and implement it forward. And that way, in the future, any RFPs, you'll have one already planned. All you do is just share it with them. But now you got to generate one. So generate one is going to all right. Don't just throw something halfway together, and because the customer will see through that, because they're going to be comparing your safety plan to the safety plans of others. So make sure that you spend some time on this. And pet peeve of mine, make sure everything's spelled correctly and use proper grammar. And I'm trying to keep my wife from laughing at it, because she knows I'm one of the worst spellers in the world, which is why I usually ask her how you spell stuff. So the first part is you want to break the safety plan down into a couple of different sections, right? So the first section, you want to discuss the foundation for a safety plan, right? So the foundation would be, what is your principles? What are your guidelines? What is your why do you have a safety plan, right? Take a paragraph and write down why you're doing that. And then the second part of that foundational part of the plan, write down about how you train your people. What training do you mandate them? How often do they get training? Are they required to get CPR training, first aid training? Are they required to get AED training? What percentages on a crew is the foreman? Will the foreman always be CPR rated and first aid rated, right? So that way, if the customer reads that, they're gonna say, okay, they're training the people, and then that way I know if the crew on my site, if something happens, they do have the ability to help each other out. Right. And then also, again, make sure part of that safety plan is say, hey, every crew, like I said, the foreman will have this training, that training, and that training. Again, you got to pick these all off for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what to put in there. You got to decide and do your own risk analysis and your return on investment and all those calculations and figure it out for yourself. But when it comes to safety, and you're talking about somebody's life, spend some money. Then the second part should be discuss where you discuss on-site safety. So, for example, one of the things you might want to say is every Monday morning at 8 a.m., we will conduct a 15-minute weekly safety tailgate session. The attendance will be mandatory. We will document the attendance, and we'll make that part of the weekly project report or however often you do the project report. That way the customer knows that you are still actively pursuing safety on the job site. As part of your project management plan, as part of your kickoff meeting, as part of your risk analysis, identify where the nearest hospital is to your job site. Now you're probably thinking, well, Chuck, why do I need to know where the hospital is? Why can't I just call 911? What if you call 911 and they're busy? But Chuck, that'll never happen. I used to be in the EMS service. I used to be a firefighter / EMT. And there have been some times, especially on full moons, where we would get a call in and literally it'd be 15, 20 minutes because we're processing another call and our sister company is out on a call. Well, okay, at that point, you'd be better off taking your person to the hospital. And if you haven't identified where the nearest hospital is, then post it somewhere on the job board, in the job site, so that way people can see. Also, have a plan already in place, and maybe even do a practice on maybe like how the cruise ships make you do that mandatory muster thing before they go out, so everybody knows where to go to get on their safety boats. Maybe do one of those at the beginning of the project and say, okay, we're going to simulate an accident, and then here's the process. Okay, Joe, Your job is to go to the front gate of the construction site. So that way, when the fire department gets there, you can direct them exactly where on the site they need to be. Make sure you have your walkie-talkie, or make sure you have your cell phone, right? And then John, your job is to, once they get to the building, show them the quickest way up. And Sherry, your job is to, since you have your first aid training, your job is to do patient care and stuff like that. So have that process already set out, and also have backups, because what if it's John that's in the accident? So, and make sure they get kind of dual rated. So may have that kind of process in place. And also make sure that you talk about on that pre-project meeting, PPE, personal protective equipment. What's required to be worn on site? All right. Do they have to wear jeans? Do they have to wear hard sole shoes? Do they have to wear steel-toed shoes? Safety glasses. Do they have to wear gloves? One of the companies I used to work for, they used to make their technicians wear gloves while terminating, because we were getting a lot of accidents with people terminating jacks and stuff like that. So those are the kind of stuff that you want to walk out. Once you're identifying your safety plan. And then also, don't forget about the equipment, right? Scissor lifts, stuff like that. What's the safety plan for that? Who's trained on it? How will they get trained on it? What about fall protection? Now, generally, you don't need fall protection when you're just working on top of a 4-foot or 6-foot ladder, but you might be doing some outside plant stuff. What if you're doing outside plant stuff, right? What if you're doing what's the maintenance hole procedures for confined space, right? Who's the you need to identify who's the responsible person for that is, and all that other stuff. And that should all be part of the project management plan anyway, but definitely put those in and put in that whole cycle in and the whole philosophy. And that should give you a good start. And if you want some more information on to help decide or help write a safety plan or get some ideas, look up OSHA, OSHA.gov. Look up the National Safety Council. I don't know what the website is off the top of my head. They got some good information out there. All right. And then write that plan. And then, like I said, don't just write it just for this customer and just, live by it. Use it. You start using it and use it for future projects. And then you'll find your accidents will go down. Your rate will go down, your insurance rates will go down, and it's just going to be a good thing all the way around. So, well, we're at our 30-minute mark. We're at 33 minutes. So I didn't quite make it to the live questions, but I have captured them, and I will make sure that we put them in the next Thursday night after hours live. So I appreciate you guys being here, your technicians and stuff. Again, see you next Thursday night at 6 p.m. Take care. Be safe.